Hey everybody, John Michael here. What if you discovered that one of the biggest obstacles to cultivating a deeper, more reliable spiritual practice was a systemic sabotage by the establishment itself, interfering with us, interference by the patriarchy, interference by the establishment, interference by colonialists that have been the bane of our existence from the moment that this country was first founded. Even when that interference comes disguised as goddess worship and feminism and the New Age law of attraction or messages from aliens or channeling, the patriarchy is always there sabotaging the growth that you can have. Well, our special guest on today's show and our panel, who are a panel of esoteric practitioners, are going to join us in discussing the need now more than ever before to smash the patriarchy, to restore the sacred feminine and the divine androgyne to the center of our spiritual practice, our political discussion, and our world. So do me a favor, and wherever you're watching this from, and I will check out the comments in a few minutes, do me a favor and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. And we will be back right after this in about 1 minute. So that'll give you time to go grab a cup of tea, cup of coffee, some water, and make sure that you realize this is your show as much as ours. So your comments, your questions, your input are valued. And we will be right back in just a few minutes. And full transparency, everyone, I am just recovering from my second eye surgery in the last 2 weeks. So doing this will be a little bit of a challenge today. Thanks in advance for your patience and for the less than stellar professionalism on the show. And Domenica, if your little one wants to be on screen, let him be on screen. For those who don't know me, I'm John Michael Salvato. I'm going to be your host for the next 30 to 45 minutes on a broadcast that we call The Brew. This is basically a show that we have one or two primary guests and a panel of friends and fellow practitioners, members of our tribe and our extended family who join us for an informal discussion. And that's exactly what it's going to be. That not only involves us that are on the screen, but involves all of you who are watching. And as I look at the comments, we've got some folks in here from South Carolina and Canada and from over in the Arab Peninsula. So welcome everyone to the show. And if you have comments, if you have questions, then we hope that you'll go ahead and join in today's topic and today's discussion. Ask those questions. Our topic today is smashing the patriarchy. And our special guest is the host of several broadcasts on Clubhouse, as well as somebody who's an author of an upcoming book, Smashing the Patriarchy. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. Coming to us all the way from Australia, where it's about 7:30 in the morning, I think. where she's also a member of the Inner Alchemy Mystery School, a part of our faculty, and a community leader in general in the world of esotericism and intersectional social justice, feminism, and global healing work. Domenica DeCrea, thank you for being with us on this show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and to share with everyone some of the work that I've been doing and some of the knowledge that I've discovered on my journey that has helped me with my own healing and has become a tool and a framework that I've been sharing with others to support them on their journey as well. And is something that's really central to the work that I do in the world also. So I'm so excited to be here and to get to share that. So thank you.
Right on. I am looking forward to having you tell your story in just a minute. With us also on the show today, we're very grateful to have Francesca Spinelli and Tahiri Devine, who will both be with us, adding to the discussion. Giving their perspective and their point of view, and hopefully inspiring some of you who are watching to join in. You see at the very bottom of the screen some instructions. If you would like to ask a question, we ask that you first follow the directions that are on the actual Facebook post, where you have to give Facebook permission to show us who it is that's talking. And that way we can put you up on the screen. If your question is a sentence or two at the longest. With four of us on the screen, we can't have paragraph long discussions up on the screen. It really becomes difficult to read, especially in my present condition. But we want to hear from you, and so if we don't get to your questions during the show, we will definitely get to you. We'll answer all the questions we can after the show as well. So as we get ready to hear from our guests, be thinking about what those questions might be. If you'll type the word question in all caps before your question when you put it in the comments, that'll get my attention a little bit easier. And again, remember that we can only share short comments, short questions on the screen, but we will get to, if you have a longer question, go ahead and ask it. We'll get to that after the show. And if you're watching after the live broadcast, remember on our Facebook channel and our YouTube channel, you can comment and ask questions as well, and we'll check those out after the show too. So, Domenica, let's go ahead and get started with you. And I'm going to try and multitask here, and I suck at this. I will be the first one to admit it. So, getting your information up on screen and pretending that it comes easy to me. Let's start with you. Rather than me reading a bio, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, your spiritual path, and then after hearing from our panel, we'll get to the actual work that you do. But give us a little background on who you are, what brought you to your spiritual journey, and just describe that journey a little bit, and then we'll hear from Francesca and Tahiri as well, to hear about their journeys and their backgrounds, their paths, and then we'll jump into the meat of the discussion.
Thank you. Yeah, so as John Michael mentioned, I'm from Australia. So I was born here, but I am the grandchild of Greek and Italian migrants who, like many other Southern Europeans after World War II, fled those areas for various reasons and migrated to places like Australia, the US, Canada, etc. And I guess for me, my spiritual path really began with my family. I've only really come to realize in recent years that my yaya or my Greek family was a witch, I guess is what you would call her, and that I had various aunties and uncles on my Italian side of my family who practiced the old witchcraft that has been disguised, in culture over the years and passed on, even through, many religious practices and whatnot. So spirituality is something that has always been in my life. And as a child, I had always been in tune with there being more to the world that meets the eye. And so I guess all of that coupled with, you know, who I am and where I come from a very early age, had me on what I would call a spiritual path. I'd forever sort of been a seeker of spirituality and the different paths and lineages, and sought out to find that as I got older and, you know, became an adult and had a bit more freedom to go out and discover what that meant, and, you know, where that interest came from. And like many in today's kind of age, I got very caught up, I guess, in what would be the new age sort of spiritual movement, trying to work out, you know, what that was all about, and what that meant, given that there was other cultures now being presented to me. I always, coming from my own cultural background, I always found it interesting engaging in other cultural spiritual practices, but it all resonated, and a lot of it did offer me some really beautiful healing, but forever it never really hit the mark until in recent times, John Michael, I started searching more about my own path and my own lineage, which is where I found yourself and the Inner Alchemy Academy, and have really come to realize who I am, and, you know, who our people are and where they come from, the history that's taken place to sort of make someone like myself forget that, and then going on that journey of discovery, which of course leads into my smashing patriarchy work as well. So I hope that gives you a little bit of insight as to who I am, and how I got here, and what spirituality is to me.
It does, and I think that our viewers will agree that that is a so much richer way of getting a sense for a person than having the host read a bio on a screen, which I always find, you know, that's when people decide that they're going to like clean their fingernails, or you know, make sure that they let the cat out, whatever. Um, so thank you for making that so real, because that's part of what we try to do here is connect people heart to heart, so that those connections are genuine. So let's continue with Tahiri, and tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your spiritual path, what brought you to that path, and brought you to where you are today.
Yes, well, thank you, John Michael, for having me here, and Domenica for inviting me too. So my name is Tahiri Divine. I am a ceremonial leader and a facilitator of root work and divination. My spiritual journey it's been ever evolving. So starting out, I grew up in a very Southern Christian military background out here in the States, and very patriarchal type of setup in my home. My father was very much a provider type and alpha masculine type of dude, and my mother was more of the very docile feminine. But within that paradigm of the super Southern Christian upbringing, I was very suppressed growing up, and I was always a very adamant reader. Even as a young child, always had questions about a lot of things that used to get me in trouble in Bible study. I was the annoying kid in Bible study or in Sunday school that I would always ask questions and know all the answers, because I truly just loved the stories. I thought they were just wild, and had a lot of questions about things that didn't make sense, and was very shunned growing up from asking questions, and kind of, you know, it's better not to ask God, those type of things. And when I got older, what was a turning point for me was I was a big Rihanna, well, still am a Rihanna fan, and Rihanna went bad girl. And I was terrified at the time, because I was like, no, the devil can't have her. The Illuminati can't have her. So I went into Christian apologetics, trying to defend the faith that I was in. And Lord and behold, it actually made me question even more about my faith, and led me onto a lot of different paths, and just being a study and a researcher. And I love history. Women's history was one of my majors when I was an undergrad, and studying antiquity, and just being very interested in anthropology and other cultures, and understanding how high or other people were. And so I went through a different phases of consciousness within my spiritual journey. So for a brief moment, I went through a lot of different schools of thoughts that eventually led me to the understanding the feminine part of divinity, because I was always still in a very more of a masculine dominated type of school of thoughts when I was looking at different things. And what really got me was etymology, because I love words. And when I learned about the etymology of the word wisdom being in the Bible meaning Sophia, or something, it was a feminine expression word, that made me go like, okay, I need to go deeper into what is this feminine aspect of God or goddess, right? And that led me into my path now of what is more of cultivating feminine spirituality. And when being feminine, not saying that it's exclusive to just women or female, it was really understanding the law of gender and how that applies to our spiritual practice, and cultivating that and building culture from that. So that was what has really brought me to this point. So I'm excited, and it's even interesting too, because on both sides of my family, my paternal grandmother and my maternal grandmother, very Christian. You couldn't tell them they're not Christian, but little witchy. They won't use those terms, but they were very much root workers, and the way they would work with the earth and with animals and the weather. It fascinated me growing up. And so now it just coming to the realization like that never left us, although it may have been blanketed with the Christian paradigm, it was still embedded. So I'm happy to be someone that was able to break free and now pave the way to cultivate that into our culture.
Oh, we are going to love having you on the show. I'm going to tell you, I could tell you right off the bat, we'll have to have all three of you back for multiple shows in the future, because just to unpack what both of you have talked about so far, and we haven't even gotten to Francesca yet, I could just tell you that we could talk for the next 3 hours rather than 45 minutes. So welcome. And Francesca, let's hear from you a little bit about your background, your journey and your path so far, and how it brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Francesca Spinelli. I'm in New York City, so if you get any sirens in the background, I apologize. But my spiritual journey was more of a disassociation before it was an association. My mother likes to tell the story about how we were sitting in Catholic, I was raised a Catholic, in Mass, and at the age of 9, the priest was talking about the blasphemy of gay marriage. And after a short amount of the homily, I was over it. And I stood up. We were sitting in the second pew, and I marched my bum down the center aisle and was like, I'm not listening to any more of this. And I stood in the back of the church in protest until everything was over, and my mother would eventually bring me home. I completely disowned my Catholicism at that point, at the age of 9, and didn't start exploring spirituality again until I was in university. And I went to India with an attempt to reclaim some meditation practices and deepen into this work, and ended up getting into really repulsive discussions with head or high meditation practitioners who were at the ashram, who were giving a lot of power to the gurus, or the people who had erected those ashrams. And there was just something so deeply true in me that was like, ugh, none of this is actually going to serve. And it wasn't until I had a massive collapse when I was 26 years old. I entered into corporate America, and I still participate in the corporate world as a mechanical engineer. And I entered into the corporate world, and I, at the age of 26, collapsed of exhaustion. They didn't know what was wrong with me. They gave all of these tests. I was hospitalized, and they kind of looked at me and said, are you under a lot of stress? And I just broke down in tears. And that was when I asked the universe or God for help. And kind of miraculously, a woman came into my life and started to teach me about how to reclaim my own body and reclaim my own power and listen to the divinity of the feminine that lives in me. And starting to begin very small steps of eat when you're hungry and sleep when you're tired were revolutionary to me. And beginning to heal this relationship with my inner feminine that I had so deeply been disassociated from was the beginning of a real reclamation of my spirituality. And now I work predominantly with sexual energies and the erotic energies to heal myself and to heal others. And it's such a deep walk, the healing of sexuality for both those who are born with vulvas and those who are born with lingams and penises. And I think what I'd love to bring to this conversation is how the patriarchy has hurt both of us, and how the reclamation of our sexual power begins to birth the reclamation of our own sovereign power in every part of our lives. And that's a little bit about me.
I after those three powerful discussions of your backgrounds and the directions that you're talking about going, I am going to let the sophomoric childish side of me out for just 1 second. Girl power. You all rock. So let's dive in. I mean, this is this is a sort of a free flowing kind of conversation. We don't have a script or set questions, but I think probably the best place to start, and we'll start with Domenica, and each of us share a little bit as we go. But let's unpack this idea about why it's so important to recognize. Somebody was telling me earlier today when I was asking them if they wanted to ask some questions during the show, and their answer was, "Well, I come from a tradition in the craft that is reclaiming, and it's all about celebrating the original witches who were women, and all of this nonsense that, as Tahiri said, when we do etymology and we look at the anthropological record, we see that the first mention of witches was in the Code of Hammurabi 3,700 years ago, and it was referring to men, and it wasn't referring to men because men were the first practitioners. It was referring to men because even 3,700 years ago, the patriarchy had women off the screen. They didn't matter. They didn't get talked about. And so the law didn't apply to them because who cared if they were practicing witchcraft? But that society cared if the men were practicing. And so we can see this culture of oppression that dates back as far as recorded history, literally. Let's talk a little bit about, from each of our perspectives, why it matters, especially today, especially in a world that has seen everything from systemic racism to gender bias to turning a blind eye to the murder of trans women and all of the other injustices, food insecurity, this nonsense that's going on with not taking care of our children in ways that responsible adults should. Let's talk about why it matters and why now. And Domenica, we're going to start with you, so that you can actually tell why why you started this Smashing the Patriarchy project and the framework that you're creating.
Thank you. And bear with me. It's a really overwhelming topic, right? It's a lot. And so the feeling is always immense. So I will do my best to be as articulate as I can. This journey for me begins in childhood. As early as I can remember, similar to Francesca's story, I think I kind of sum it up and say I came out of the womb fighting the patriarchy in every sense of the manner in my family. So my father's side of the family are Italian, Calabrese, Southern Italian, right, which is very old culture in a very two-pronged way, in the sense of the old culture, and then the very traditional patriarchal, more sort of recent timeline that had really taken over that region. And to the point of all of the Southern Italians fleeing that part of Italy at that time and coming here, they brought all of that with them, and nothing really changed. Yes, there's a lot of assimilation to, you know, the Australian way of life, but that patriarchal structure was something I was born into, and then something I experienced, of course, through the religion side of thing, also being Roman Catholic. I'd always been inclined to seek for spirituality, but I'd sit in church and look at Jesus and just think, this just is not it. And so I was aware that something was not correct, and then school was a horrific experience for me as well. That then was me interfacing with the Australian patriarchy, which is a very Western Anglo-Saxon Protestant model of patriarchy, and culturally at a clash with really who our innate culture is, and those inherent values and traditions that have lasted, that really come from those ancient times, that are embedded in the wisdom of the feminine, which now I see, but hadn't understood for many years. And so in the system in Australia, it was just this horrific clash with, you know, what is the patriarchy here. And I'd always asked and questioned what was wrong with the world because of my own experience, but then also looking at the experience of young children in other parts of the world, in developing regions, looking at the injustice everywhere. And of course, being that I live in and within a settler colony, I'm, you know, Australia, what is Australia other than stolen lands of the First Nations people of this country? So you grow up very well aware of an injustice, and if you understand enough about your own people, you can empathize and understand, you know, the systemic and historic factors that have resulted in the horrific conditions that First Nations people live in Australia, but globally. And it's just not something that you can bystand. It's not something I can bystand, and it's something I've never been able to bystand, and I've forever been in trouble for it. I've forever been, you know, punished for that, whether I was fighting against patriarchy in my family or in the school or in the workplace. I just forever had been condemned and punished for that speaking out. And so I grew up being perpetually gaslit, scapegoated, and you know, the black sheep, whatever the names are. And really relished in it because, quite frankly, I've excelled at everything I've done in my life, and I haven't needed any of these people to validate me and my existence, nor my skill or capability. And so after spending 30 years of my life in a perpetual trauma response trying to prove myself to patriarchy, and, you know, dropped out of high school, dropped out of university twice, built an international career, traveled, did all the things, you know, went and co-founded a startup that, you know, has been early stages, but been awarded and recognized by government and given. I went, you know what? I see, I know what I'm talking about. And so in the last couple of years in particular, I've been on this sort of awakening of sorts of the realities of systemic oppression. So it's something I've always been interested in, and as a result, on the kind of down low, have spent the last 10 years deeply researching from every possible angle, from reading about Afro-Indigenous wisdom, ancient culture, high civilizations, history. Conspiracy theories, I've gone down every rabbit hole, but with critical thinking, so as to say, okay, thanks for doing all the kind of work for us, conspiracy theorists. Now I'll go away and do the research, which I did. So all of that led me to understanding, you know, the historical cultural wars that have gone on the planet, and the things that have taken place, how that has unfolded into where we are today, and the system that has been built. So other things that I've studied is psychology, anthropology, astronomy, astrology, quantum physics, like honestly, sociology, you name it. I've in the last 10 years, I've just gone down several rabbit holes garnering a whole range of different, I guess, data points on the system, history, culture, and then spirituality, and metaphysics. And somehow, within this awakening, it all kind of just clicked and made sense and just came to me in a very succinct way as to how we've gotten to where we are up in this point in humanity's evolution of consciousness, but also society. And it's very clear that patriarchy has its roots in metaphysics, in the positive, negative, feminine, masculine law of polarity that is present in all things, and that in that root principle, what patriarchy is really the founding supremacist ideology, in ranking the masculine or the male as more dominant or supreme to the feminine and the female. And that at its core, that is just simply what patriarchy is. And how it came into manifest. There's a bigger conversation around the cosmic timeline, cycles of the ages, that warrants how we got to that place. It is a necessary part of the evolution of humanity's consciousness, I believe. However, it is also important that we recognize what that is, how that's manifested, and to undo it and learn from it, right? And so that historical process of that root in the metaphysics and what took place as that was happening and unfolding in the journey of the evolution of humanity's consciousness, the role that plays in culture and society and systems, and how it got us to where we are today. So where we are today in 2021, when we say patriarchy, what we're talking about is systemic patriarchy, which is ultimately the manifestation that original root has become. And that is what is at this point a total system of oppression and domination that has been created and solidified. And really what that is in today's day and age, rather, as to how it takes form, is what we call the interlocking political systems that is imperialist, capitalist, white supremacist patriarchy. And when you break that down and then break down the historical process, you can see a really kind of clear picture as to how we got to what this matrix of domination is today, and resulting in all the types of epidemics and oppression and pandemic that we see across every sphere of the planet, and especially as it relates to culture and humanity and Earth's eldest ancestors, our Afro-Indigenous ancestors, who are the original custodians and gatekeepers and wisdom holders of what is the original science, religion, spirituality of Earth, which is the understanding of natural divine order, which of course embodies the feminine and the masculine. And I will land there because that really is.
I was going to say, let's land there, because that's a perfect segue into what I want to talk with Tahiri about. Because you mentioned something in the introduction that I found very resonant. And that is in the study of Hermeticism and understanding, of course, that Hermeticism comes from the continent and was one of the biggest things, I think, in the 19th century that got completely distorted by a bunch of old, powerful, rich white men. Starting with a concept, a principle as simple as the principle of gender. Where Domenica touched on this a little bit as well, where the evolution of understanding the divine masculine and divine feminine principles, I believe personally was to lead us to that place where the masculine and feminine, or the yin and the yang, merge and give birth to what I call the divine androgyne. Which is both fully human, fully spirit, fully active, fully passive. So as a gender non-binary person, a gender queer person, and a person of mixed racial background, whose people migrated from, escaped from Genova in Italy to Sicilia, where they reunited with our families from Tunisia, with the other side of our family. Um, my last name means saved because we were spared from the Carthaginian wars, and the concept that was handed down over generations was that um, you'll never be able to fully come into your power until you recognize that everything our people in the Afro-Sicilian tradition, everything our people did, right down to the mafia, the mob or whatever you want to call it, were all acts of retaliation against the patriarchy, who were oppressing and causing suffering, and taking concepts like the principle of gender and manipulating it to create this false narrative of masculine supremacy, that we would see fast forwarding into the 1600s, where that patriarchy then went a step further, a step more disgraceful, and created the concept of race, which until that time did not exist anywhere in the world. There was no such thing as race. People would ask where you were from, where your people were from. So if you wouldn't mind, Tahiri, talk to us as a person of color, as a woman, as someone who has lived in a country where I presume that, like all of us, you have seen this oppression firsthand, more than any of us, on this panel today. And why does that make you feel like it's time to have a new conversation?
Oh yeah, that is amazing. Thank you, thank you. It's so interesting how things are full circle because again, on my maternal lineage, actually, my great grandmother's grandparents are actually from Italy, and they migrated to the Haiti prior to coming to actual Americas, which was Louisiana, where they end up staying there, and our family is dispersed from that area, and just to hone in onto the whole concept of why these conversations are important to have a new perspective. One, for me, what was really important to me, I am a learner of truth, and my thing is I don't care about who it makes it look bad. I don't care about who the politics of truth. I just want truth because I feel like when we have truth, we're able to work with a better framework on how to grow, heal, deal, and transmute. And even when it comes to patriarchy within certain sectors or cults of consciousness that I have encountered, there is this overarching idea that patriarchy only came from white European constructs. And I'm like, well, that's not truth. If we're going to say this specific group of people, Black, Afro-Indigenous people, are the first peoples, we have to honor that there's good things that definitely came from these our cultures, but we have to also respect and honor the not so great things, and shed light to that, and deal with it. Like, okay, how can we deal with this, and what was it? A really great book that was able to help open and expand my consciousness to this was a book by author Mama Zogbe, and it was called oh goodness, I don't know why it's leaving me.
The
Mama
Sybil.
Yes, thank you. The Sibyls. Yes. And she did a really, really great job of really dissecting what took place during the rise of patriarchy and really who was the first peoples to really implement that part of into our consciousness and how that has transpired to where we are today. And so when we're looking at this rise, or whether it was jealousy, whether it was a out of power dynamic with the current feminine power at that time, we have to really say, well, what is taking place today, and being able to, like, yes, shed light and heal and transmute. So now my conversations are more so, let's take, as you said, let's take the race concept out of it, because that is a construct that was created out of our patriarchal upbringing. Let's take more now, who's benefiting and who's hurting from it. Men and women, male, female, and all of us in between. all suffer from patriarchy because it denies a part of us to really connect, to really embrace receptivity, to even just be in beingness of ourselves and embracing that. And then we end up getting where we are today, where there's so much separation of trying to find their own identity, but you can't find your identity, or you can't, let's say this, you can't give yourself a healthy framework if you're not giving grounded truth on what to work on, and even know what you're dealing with. So in line with what Dominica was saying, it's like when we're talking about smashing patriarchy, we're not talking, or at least I know I say this too. I get people in my comments section sometimes like, "Oh, you're anti-male or you're anti-men. There's a war on masculinity." Like, no, there's a war on toxic masculinity, toxic femininity, because there is toxicness in being in the feminine too, polarized on the feminine side. There's toxic on both ends, but when we come into the middle, it's not even about balance anymore. And I'm a Libra. I'm all about balance, balance. And what I've learned with that word balance, what happens is there's a weight that's placed on it, and then it becomes a shifting of blame. Well, it's this person's fault. Well, it's that person's fault, because now we're trying to weigh things at a balance versus, well, what's the harmony on what this energy brings, as masculine energy brings, as feminine energy brings, and how can we be in harmony with each other? Because who said 50-50 was balance? What's 90-90 10? We have 100 zeros balance, 30-70. So I think now coming into a space where we are today, having these conversations of like shedding light to the truth and really looking at the anthropology, at the etymology, at the whole entire historical or historical perspectives as well, to give ourselves a framework of where we came from and what do we want the future to be? What do we want our children to bring? Because we already know we're coming into this new age. The previous age is dying out. Patriarchy is dying out. It's not fully gone, but with the tangibles that we have now, what can we do as conscious awakened beings to now recreate a new future and a new path for us to move forward? So I look forward to talking about this, because even when I look into my own family dynamics, the new generation, more myself, my generation, millennials, and my younger cousins that are coming up, they're having different conversations that the older generation are not ready to have. We're having conscious accountability that they're not ready to have. And I'm at a space where, like, I can't wait for you guys to be ready to have this. I have to deal this with me. I have to heal this with me and deal with the codependency. I have to deal with all the different aspects that were functioned within me because of the patriarchal society that we have, and because of the darkness of understanding that we had of the feminine perspective, of merging that into our spiritual practice and finding a new way to really to be. It's just really a way of being. So I love that we are here and finding ways to merge that. And I think it's great when we can merge the ancient ways with the modern. And I think that's the new paradigm that we're coming into. And that's something that I love. And I love Dominica gave me a really great expansion of what I do, because she's like, you're not just spirituality, you're culture. And I was like, oh wow, I didn't think of it like that. Cultivating culture. And now it's like, well, how are we going to do that? And what type of culture are we going to bring to the forefront? Because that is what we're here, I believe, that as the awakened ones, right, are here to do. So I yield the mic, but I really want to put that perspective. Is like, there's no one person or group of people can shift blame to. It's about owning our collective um, input on how we got to this, but then also to accountability, but then also how do we reshape and reform?
Y'all are absolutely amazing. That it sounds like we scripted this whole thing to dovetail into one another. I just have to say, Tahiri, that it's very clear to me that the cunning women that are part of your heritage, that lineage continues to this day. And thank you so much for that perspective, which leads us into a comment that Gwen made, where she says it denies oneness with a purpose, resources, rulership, and territory, manipulative through religious and spiritual social implant, remembering our connectedness. And so, what I want to ask you, Francesca, is as we sort of continue to unpack this and talk a little bit about what that means for each of us personally. You brought up a really good point in the beginning of the show, talking about about the work that you do with sacred sexuality, And I think that that it would be really helpful for folks to maybe hear what that means in terms of the picture going forward. How does what we just heard Domenica and Tahiri talk about manifest itself in broken sexuality, broken intimacy, and these broken bonds that aren't just broken intimacy with one another, between genders, across genders, transgender, and beyond gender, but also manifests, I think, as a brokenness in our sexuality and intimacy with ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you for even the opportunity. The thing that I usually say is that if you want to control someone, just control their sexuality, and then you will have the utmost power over them. You have the ability to manipulate someone because they're going to stay in their mind and at best maybe go down to their heart. But so much of our own personal power resides in our sexual energy. And as soon as you repress it, and as soon as you begin to veil it in shame, then you have a population that is so easily manipulated. And I kind of look at the sexual healing as the medicine for all of us, because when we begin to cultivate and heal the relationship with our own sexuality in any solo experiences and in partnered experiences, everything begins to dissolve. And the cornerstones of patriarchy that Domenica was talking about, the imperialistic colonialism, white supremacy, heteronormative, all of it dissolves because you begin to understand you are not this body. Race goes away, gender goes away, sexual orientation goes away. All of it just dissolves. And so I consider sexuality and this sovereign practice through sex magic with both men and women to kind of be a cheat sheet. It's like a cheat road. Like, we're all talking about the history and everything so deeply up here, which is so important to contextualize. But if you want to get really down and dirty, and that's kind of the people that I work with and that come to my temple, they're ready to do a lot of that shed. And all of a sudden frameworks change, perceptions change, because now you realize it's all just been this story. It's just a story that you've been told because you've touched into your truest essence of your soul through sexuality. And I started in the beginning that the patriarchy, in my belief, has taken so much away from people who have penises and lingams just as much as it has taken from those with vulvas. And so often the men that I work with are finally able to surrender into their truest nature of their femininity, of their masculinity, and be in themselves for the first time in their lives. And when you have those with penises able to touch into that truth that, yeah, they've been really wounded too, then they get to show up so differently with those who have vulvas, with those who don't have the same skin color, because you've allowed those people who have been told you have been on the top of the food chain for so long, and they're up there like, it ain't fun up here. This isn't fun for anybody, So I think there's a real deep reclamation of that brokenness you were talking about to heal one another, because sexuality is so deeply wounded, and it's the root of a lot of the other wounds that come with it.
Wow. Absolutely. And I think, first of all, I thank the three of you for just that segment alone, because I think that it again leads us into the next and final part of our discussion today. I can't believe we've already been on for 50 minutes. It feels like I was thinking we were like almost at the half-hour mark, and we have 10 minutes to go. I'm stunned. But for me, I think that the only thing I can add to that is what feels organic and what feels wholesome and sacred, if you will, for me, is that the place where we begin is always within, and so that beginning within as a tool for healing us and then healing the world around us has to begin with compassion. So we're going to take a break for just 1 second and hear from a public service announcement from one of the organizations that's doing amazing work around the world, which is the Charter for Compassion, that is changing up this dialogue around spirituality and esotericism and religion and equality and social justice. And when we come back, we're going to sadly, kind of encapsulate a little bit about where we go from here. With some of the things that are coming up, like Domenica's class and some of the work that Domenica and Tahiri do on Clubhouse, and Francesca's work, and the work that we do at the Inner Alchemy School. But first, I'd like everybody to consider this and what would happen in our world if we dethrone those in the patriarchy and put another there. We'll be right back.
The principle of compassion lies at the heart of all religious, ethical, and spiritual traditions,
calling us always to treat all others as we wish to be treated ourselves.
Compassion impels us to work tirelessly to alleviate the suffering of our fellow creatures.
To dethrone ourselves from the center of our world and put another there.
To honor the inviolable sanctity of every single human being.
Treating everybody without exception.
With absolute justice, equity, and respect.
It is also necessary in both public and private life
to refrain consistently and empathically from inflicting pain.
To act or speak violently out of spite, chauvinism, or self-interest.
To impoverish, exploit, or deny basic rights to anybody.
And to incite hatred by denigrating others, even our enemies.
Is a denial of our common humanity.
We acknowledge that we have failed to live compassionately.
And that some have even increased the sum of human misery in the name of religion.
We therefore call upon all men and women
to restore compassion
to the center of morality and religion.
To return to the ancient principle
that any interpretation of scripture
that breeds violence,
hatred, or disdain
is illegitimate.
To ensure that youth are given accurate and respectful information
about other traditions, religions, and cultures.
To encourage a positive appreciation
of cultural and religious diversity.
To cultivate
an informed empathy
with the suffering of all human beings,
even those
regarded as enemies.
We urgently need to make compassion a clear, luminous, and dynamic force in our polarized world.
Rooted in a principled determination to transcend selfishness.
Compassion can break down political, dogmatic, ideological, and religious boundaries.
Born of our deep interdependence, compassion is essential for human relationships and to a fulfilled humanity.
It is the path to enlightenment and indispensable in the creation of a just economy and a peaceful global community.
And we're back. You are watching The Brew, and I have these wonderful folks with us today talking about smashing the patriarchy. And, each of us is doing our part in dismantling patriarchy, dismantling systemic racism, poverty, misogyny, all of these inequities, transphobia, and injustice in general. But what I'd love to do, since we're running out of time, is just go around the room one more time and give each of you an opportunity to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing, just briefly, so that maybe it inspires folks who are watching, who are a little bit quiet today. I think just because your conversations were literally so riveting that I don't think anybody wanted to even ask a question. We just wanted you to speak. And we'll definitely continue this conversation and have you back on another show if you'll do us the honors. But Domenica, I know that on October 30th, you're going to be doing a workshop during our day-long event, the Practical Magic celebration, where you'll be unpacking this a little bit further. But tell us beyond that what some of the things are that you're doing that folks can connect with you, and how can they connect with you?
Yeah, thank you. So the best ways to connect with me would be via Clubhouse or Instagram. You can find me by looking up my handle, which is Mimi Love. It's MIMI_love. What I'm really focused on in terms of moving forward when it comes to this work is really helping people understand. I'm just going to wind it back quickly. What patriarchy has done has really been to colonize our minds, our bodies, and our souls. So the dismantling, and of course our physical reality, right? So the dismantling process really needs to happen at every level. So being able to walk people through what that looks like on all of those levels, but specifically what's going on in the realm of the mind and what we need to do there for the dismantling process. Because really what this system is, and I don't want to get too dark with this, but really this system is a system of psychological terrorism, which really keeps us hindered in these types of personal and interpersonal relationship dynamics that really have us living in this constant state of like projection and manipulation and what we call the drama triad in terms of how we relate to one another. And so we have a lot of work to do on an inner level, but also in relationships and across systems to start to dismantle these ways of being, hypermasculine ways of being, and the ways that they manifest within relationships. So on Clubhouse, I have a club, Smashing Patriarchy, and we really break all of that down end to end from, you know, all the history and the research, but going into the psychology and the psychotherapy. And then to a point that Francesca built on, some of what Tahiri and I have been talking about, and Tahiri does this work as well, but is how we start to get into that sacred sexuality and how we start to bring that teaching back to the world, because we came to the same realization as Francesca that is really, it's critical to our liberation and healing, and particularly in the healing of men. I mean, yes, everybody, but particularly for the healing of men. And so that's also a little sort of extra bit of work that I guess I'll be working on and building on as well. But really going into the psychological aspects, because we have a lot of trauma from this lifetime, but also a lot of intergenerational trauma as a collective that we really have to unpack and heal deeply. And a lot of that will be embodied healing, because what we've been doing through religion and New Age spirituality is spiritual bypassing. And so now we need to get back to embodied wisdom, grounded spirituality, and all of the dark feminine, you know, knowledge and teachings that have been so deeply suppressed. We need to rewild. We need to get a little bit unruly on the planet. So I'll be making my best efforts to spark that flame while I'm at least still here.
Right on. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being here today. Tahiri, go ahead and build on that and tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how folks can get in touch with you. And I will try my best to multitask and listen and put your banner up at the same time.
Awesome. Yes. Well, you guys can connect with me on all my social sites as Tahiri Divine. I always highly suggest that sign up for my mailing list. That's the best way to really keep up with me, because we've seen what happened with the Facebook apocalypse. We want to make sure we keep in contact. But I do have an online feminine mystery school called the Emergence Temple, and we started last year to dive into the psyche of the sacred feminine archetypes. So I really I'm an archetypical storyteller, and I like to use archetypes as a way to connect and to really understand our own psyche, how we shape and maneuver. So we're relaunching our class this fall, November 1st. We'll be diving into 3 archetypes, which is the mother, the sacred whore, and then the Maya. And I think these are important archetypes for all people, but I'm mainly specifically working with vulva owners right now, with women vulva owners, to really understand the dichotomy that we have with the Madonna whore complex, and also the Maya, which is just the illusion, and knowing how to not just recognize it in pop culture, in modern culture, but then also too in our own psyche, and then to give these archetypes a new story, because we're shifting to a new paradigm. And I think it's important to take these archetypes, learn their classic story, but then how can I embody it with a new or elevated perspective on how we are moving forward with the current vibration of our world right now. So that is something I really love to do. And it's right around, again, we talked about this too, Domenica, and I love that, Francesca, that you're here, because sacred sexuality is the key to really breaking out of this matrix that has been keeping us stuck and locked in. So if you guys are definitely interested in learning, connected with me, I am on all social sites as Tahiri Divine, and you guys can definitely connect with me. And I'm sorry, it's Tahiri Divine, not Ask. Sorry, so Tahiri Divine. No worries.
Fix that.
Yes,
yeah, I told you I wasn't good at multitasking.
No worries.
Here we go.
But yeah, so I love that I'm able to be with you all and share that and grow and expand. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to that. Now, these the classes that you're doing and these workshops on the archetypes, is that all through Clubhouse?
No, it's actually going to be on a private server. So it's I actually have a 4-week online course that we do. So if you go to Tahiri Divine or all my social sites, there's links to sign up and learn more about why these archetypes. And the previous class will be available from last year. Will be available soon for those purchase, if those who want to take that class as well. And we have a corresponding retreat starting next year in April that actually will spend each day with the archetypes of embodying these archetypes and working through that. So I'm excited to be hosting my first in-person retreat in Scottsdale, Arizona, April 14th through the 17th. So if you're interested, again, all those information will be on my Tahiri Divine pages, all of them.
and if you would, if you don't mind, put that in the comments below today's show on Facebook, and then I'll go ahead and copy it to the YouTube channel as well, so that folks have the ability, if you're watching on the replay on YouTube, you could just go ahead and look at the About section. I'll put this information, everybody's contact information, and on Facebook, it'll be in the comments below.
Awesome. I sure will do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Francesca, the mic is yours.
Thank you. I was thinking about your question, too, around what would happen if we put people in power who have smashed their own inner patriarchy conditioning and are here to spread that. And I really feel like we'll return to the cyclical nature, and we will start to remember that we're extensions of nature, and we're not here to live in perpetual forward motion. And we'll remember that we're cyclical beings. And when we forgive ourselves and give us the grace to live cyclically, then we live this full life of continuous unfolding and never-ending revelations. Confessedly, my work is very much word of mouth. It is sacred temple space in which people are here with me, and we are working through whatever it is that is coming up for them while using sexual energies. And that could be tantric breathwork practices, that could be erotic touch, that could be kinkifying a shadow and stepping into archetypes in the BDSM realm. I particularly enjoy when I get to step into the dominatrix archetype and we kinkify a shadow and really work with it and allow for a submissive to fully surrender into the wound and move the energy with their erotic nature. So I'm in New York City, but I enjoy having these conversations. And if there is anyone who feels deeply called to explore, I'd be open to walking through the arc of that vetting process.
And how is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Oh, yeah, I guess my Instagram is, so so lame. Frankie Spins, FRANKIE SPINSS.
See, did I get it right?
Nailed it.
All right. All right. So thank you again, all three of you. I wish that we had, I wish that we had time to continue. I can't believe we've already gone over the hour. So I will, first of all, give my heartfelt thanks to Domenica and to Hiri and to Francesca, to everybody who's watching. And I will wrap up very quickly. In fact, I will try and put this on the screen before they kick us off. Let's see. And this way, you guys will have the opportunity to mark your calendars for Saturday, October 30th, from 11 a.m. Eastern Time to 6:30 p.m. So that you can join us for a full day of classes and workshops and so much more, absolutely free. You'll see the information at the bottom of your screen. You can reach us at inneralchemy.online/event for more information. We hope to see you there. We encourage you to join us next week as well, when our guests, we're very, very excited to have an entire show that will be dedicated to transcending gender. And so we will have some genderqueer practitioners on the show, some non-binary practitioners. It promises to be another incredible show, and I know we'll run out of time with those folks as well. So as we say at the end of every one of these broadcasts, and hopefully I'll get this in before we are done today, stay in the moment, because that is where your power is. Fill that moment with gratitude. Fill that moment with forgiveness for the times that we missed the mark, and with celebration for the times that we exceeded, and know that the best is yet to come. I'll look forward to seeing each one of you in our future shows, and we'll be closing out with just a brief message, if I can find it, our outro, and I will see our guests on Facebook and YouTube Live, where we'll continue to take your questions. Thank you, everybody. Have a great one.